Chapter 12, User Training. Training is an ongoing learning process that is a requirement of a successful new PACS program. The sole purpose of training is to achieve better job performance, plain and simple. If you want to ensure success with a new PACS, staff turnover, workflow changes, upgrades, new systems, and general performance improvement initiatives should all trigger some form of formal staff training. Assessing training needs involves figuring out the answers to the why, who, what, where, when, and how questions of a training program. First, we're going to talk about the why part of training. The why of training determines the purpose of training. Is it because there has been or needs to be some new software and upgrades coming into place at your hospital? Bringing on new software often involves creating a system implementation plan. Or maybe it is because there are new staff members who require access to a training program that shows them how to use appropriate information efficiently and effectively. There could also be some workflow changes that take place where existing staff may need retrained on the changes. Also, performance reviews on staff members may dictate the need for a training program. Who and what? The who and what of this portion of the needs analysis should be a list of users, their roles, and description of tasks with appropriate performance measures that each user or user role needs to learn. Best way to find training tasks and audience is through workflow assessment. It should show the normal flow of data as well as important points where normal data is modified. A workflow document should be created for every single user. The best way to see who and what should be trained is to compare the new and existing workflows. In situations where a staff member needs retrained, it is important to meet with their supervisor first to review the tasks that should be included in the training program. When answering the where question of a needs assessment, your outcome should be a list of available training centers and needs. For example, will you need a computer classroom? You will need to determine how many workstations you'll need, as well as if you have any unique equipment that is necessary, such as scanners, printers, and barcode equipment. Will you need to follow up training after the primary training occurs? A quiet location is necessary if one-on-one training is being implemented. You should ask yourself if you have or want the ability for training to be web-based, because this is always an option as well. Now on to the when of training needs analysis. You should think about when the go live will actually occur. When will this start? This is important because users need time to practice the new changes and the skills before the go live actually occurs. But you don't want to train too early because it can result in a loss of skills before the go live actually occurs. It is important to coordinate training times with area supervisors to ensure their availability. Sometimes you will need to wait on the radiology department to receive new equipment or make sure there are no other staff commitments prior to scheduling training. Also, sometimes vendors' input and availability must also be taken into consideration for training, so make sure you check with them as well. We will also talk about a few training methods. First is the train the trainers method. This is where a vendor has a super user from the department and they will train the super user first. A super user then trains the remaining staff. This is important even after go live occurs, so the super user isn't necessarily off the hook or their job isn't done once the primary training has been accomplished. The super user should be comfortable with IT systems. They should have a good rapport with coworkers. They need to understand the workflow and how to communicate issues to the primary PACS support team. The super user requires time off from normal duties in order to train, so make sure that this is accommodated as well. They also need to become experts to not pass on any incorrect info to the trainees. So you don't want the super user to misunderstand anything that you have trained them in, so that way they don't pass on that information to the rest of the department, and then the whole department ends up being trained incorrectly on certain parts of the training process. Another method of training is for the vendor to train all of the staff. The vendors usually allow a set number of hours of training as part of the contract. This is usually something that is decided up front, either before or when the system is being purchased. This method decreases the time commitment of the staff and is sometimes more expensive and also less flexible depending on the vendor's availability. Another method is to have the IT staff be the trainers. The vendors would train the IT staff, and then the IT staff comes and trains the radiology department. This often means that the IT staff need to be pre-trained on the radiology workflow, so they need to be up to date and competent on how the radiology department works in order to be able to teach them how. But a downside is that the IT staff are not usually available for help after go live since they have their own IT duties with their job. There is the one-on-one training method. This is used for users that are difficult to schedule and need customization. This typically happens with physicians or radiologists, especially a doctor that is usually en route to multiple locations, so they're all over the place. It's hard to get them to sit down and actually do the training, so it's best that a one-on-one approach is used for them. It is usually a 1-hour session, and it just covers the basic tasks of the system. Plan on follow-up sessions to learn advanced applications on further customization. So get them the basic needs of what they need for go live, and then after go live, they can learn more once there is time. Another training method is to use electronic media. Two different forms are what we'll talk about. One is online training modules. So these are often used for staff that don't require much access to the system. And then there's standardized presentations that can be used. And these, if they are used, they should be made accessible at the user's convenience. So maybe posted on the intranet where whenever the user works, he or she is able to access at whatever time is convenient for them. Adult learning principles should be used when developing training programs. Training should be relevant. The user should understand easily why the information is important and applicable to what they are learning. Be sure to clearly define why the new information is relevant to their job performance. Please know that adult learners are generally self-directed or autonomous. They know in what ways they learn the best and what their learning needs are. Some adult learners learn best through pictures, some through audio, maybe video as well, some through brainstorming, and others through even different ways. You should be flexible with your learning style in order to try to respond to all of these different types of learners. You must take into account the prior learning experiences and existing knowledge when you teach. Often, the learner's past experiences can actually influence their current learning experience if there can be a connection made between the two. Adults are problem or task-centered learners, and they're also goal-oriented. So it is important to tie together the clear learning objectives and specific tasks to help increase their participation in the learning process. Adult learning is affected by external and internal motivations. External motivations are to fulfill the expectations or recommendations of the job or to obtain a better job. Internal motivations include achieving a higher job satisfaction and also just to simply improve the learner's self-esteem. So there are a few different ways you can reach out to adult learners to make your training effective because, as I just said, each individual doesn't learn by the same style as others. First, you'll have the visual learner. They prefer documentations and presentations. You should provide them with written instructions, illustrations, charts, and graphs. These types of learners are often well organized and they study by outlining, so it is helpful to provide cheat sheets for them. Then there are the auditory learners. They prefer verbal instructions and can remember what they are told. It's important to use verbal repetition with them and also discussion. So it is helpful to rephrase points and also use the questions. Jokes are encouraged, and they actually help stimulate the memory on the material that is being learned. These individuals often find it hard to work quietly for long periods, and it is important to incorporate media into your speech. Then there is the kinesthetic learner. They remember best by getting involved, so they just need to move around, and it helps to work manually with ideas for this type of learner. They usually have good motor coordination, and it is important to provide multiple hands-on activities when teaching them. They often have trouble staying still for long periods. You'll often find them getting ahead in lesson plans, so it is helpful to permit breaks often. So you should ask the vendor for pertinent training materials. It is their system. They will often have a good amount of materials that they can give you to help teach your users. Try to obtain electronic copies as well as cheat sheets, so then you can modify them to your facility in the training process. Creating a training plan is the first step in the implementation process. You'll need to plan days, times, locations, and the users that should be involved in the training. You need to finish the training plan at probably around 1 month in advance and make it available to all the users. You should schedule training that is specific to each user role, and only have them receive the training on what they actually need to learn, not what everyone else needs to learn as well. You need to work with the supervisors to make sure the training schedule is accommodating each department, and that goes for the schedules of their staff members. So make sure that you coordinate with the supervisors so that you can make time to get their staff trained. For example, you don't want to schedule training during a department's high volume times, because techs will need to come and go in order to get the work done, and they will probably miss important parts of the training. Be sure to account for any follow-up training that can occur after go live. Remember, the training process doesn't just stop after the initial training is done. There needs to be some follow-up applications as well. You need to set up the test system for training with all examples on the live system. Many users will want to try scenarios beyond what is planned in the training class. The more real the training system is, the more relevant the training will be to the user in a real live situation. Set up users with their roles or privileges they will be using, so don't confuse them with options they won't need. Create ongoing training and support materials. Remember, repetitiveness is key. And again, the cheat sheets come up. Remember, put those cheat sheets near a workstation as reminders on how to perform certain tasks for the users. As far as evaluation is concerned, it is important to involve both formative and summative assessments in order to enhance a training program. Assessment measures should be developed along with the training plan, since they are a measurement of how well the goals of training are achieved. A formative assessment monitors the learning process throughout the whole learning cycle. This gives rapid feedback and also allows the teacher to modify the teaching process along the way. For the summative assessments, the measures are performed at the end of the learning cycle, for example, at the end of the semester or an on-the-job assessment. Kirkpatrick's 4 levels of evaluation are used commonly for corporate training programs. In Level 1, the assessment of the student's reaction to the training program is evaluated. This is done by surveys. In Level 2, this is the self-assessment by the users and the skill testing of learners by the instructor during the training session. Level 3 is an on-the-job assessment of learned skills, and this is typically done by the supervisor. And then there is a Level 4, which it assesses the business process improvements resulting from the training. For example, improved quality may occur because of the training, or higher sales, reduced costs, or increased customer satisfaction. A few things to take away from this is that training never stops. It should be an ongoing learning process. And also, it is important to monitor the user performance in order to figure out when follow-up training or applications is necessary.